At her son's funeral, Evelyn Grant watched her daughter-in-law sob through a veil she'd clearly rehearsed in. Retired paralegal, widow, mother. She didn't blink. When Whitney whispered, "You'll take care of me now, right?" Evelyn already knew the answer. By Monday, Whitney's name was gone. From the will, the deed, and every account she thought she owned. Evelyn had buried her son, but not her backbone. And when Whitney came clawing for more, the documents answered louder than grief ever could. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The cemetery wind cut through Evelyn Grant's coat like it was nothing. Black wool or not, the January air in Omaha had a way of reminding people what silence really sounded like. The kind that hummed beneath everything. She stood still at the graveside, one gloved hand holding a small white rose, the other gripping the folded obituary program as if it might keep her upright. The preacher's words blurred into the gray sky. Evelyn didn't cry. Not because she couldn't. She just didn't see the point. The people around her wept loudly enough for 3 funerals. Somewhere behind her, a woman sniffled into her scarf. Another man coughed to fill the quiet. Then came Whitney. She emerged from the line of mourners like she was stepping onto a stage. Face painted pale, black veil fluttering like a prop that knew its cue. Her sobs were deliberate, the kind that started loud and stayed loud. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest and stumbled toward the casket. "Oh, Aaron," she moaned, voice pitched just right for the cameras of sympathy. "You are my whole world." Evelyn didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the simple brass plaque at the head of the grave. Aaron Grant, 1986-2024. Nothing fancy, just the truth. Whitney turned, mascara streaking. She caught Evelyn's arm and leaned in close, her breath sweet with the faint trace of peppermint lip gloss. "You'll take care of me now, right?" she whispered, the words slipping through her teeth like an arrangement, not a plea. Evelyn's grip tightened on the folded program. She didn't answer. The funeral director gave a polite nod, signaling the end. The crowd began to drift away. Polite murmurs, coat buttons snapping, engines starting. Whitney lingered, scanning faces to make sure she was seen. She dabbed at her cheeks again, letting out one more theatrical sob before joining a group of Aaron's co-workers by the gate. Evelyn waited until the last handful of dirt fell. Then she bent, set the rose gently against the casket, and whispered something only the wind heard. When she turned, her knees threatened to give, but she didn't let them. Step by step, she crossed the frozen grass toward the parking lot. Her breath left small ghosts behind her. At her car, Pam Boyd was waiting. Same age, same no-nonsense bearing, her gray scarf wound tight against her throat. She didn't say a word, just held out a tissue. Evelyn took it, more for the gesture than the use. "Cold one," Pam murmured finally. Evelyn nodded. He hated the cold. Pam looked toward the casket in the distance. He didn't deserve this circus. Evelyn gave a quiet exhale. No, he didn't. They stood in silence for a long moment, 2 women on the edge of something that couldn't be undone. Whitney's laughter rang faintly from across the lot. High, sharp, misplaced. She was showing someone something on her phone, a flash of movement, maybe a selfie. Evelyn turned her back to it. "She'll make this about her," Pam said flatly. "She already has." Evelyn opened the car door, sliding in carefully, every motion measured. The seat was cold against her spine. On the dashboard sat the glove box folder she'd brought. The one marked Documents, Erin in her careful handwriting. She touched it once, then closed the compartment. Pam leaned down to the window. "You want me to follow you home?" Evelyn shook her head. "I'll be fine." Pam hesitated, then said softly, "Call me if she tries anything." Evelyn met her eyes, steady, unblinking. "She will." The engine started with a cough. Evelyn eased onto the road, her headlights catching the long stretch of icy blacktop ahead. In the rearview mirror, the graveyard lights flickered, small and distant. She didn't look back. Half a mile down the road, she pulled over at a stop sign, hands still on the wheel. For a moment, her reflection in the side mirror looked like someone older, smaller. The silence in the car was thick, pressing. Then she reached into her coat pocket and unfolded a slip of paper Aaron had written months ago. His handwriting neat, confident. Just one line. "Mom, don't let her touch it." Her breath hitched, but she didn't cry. She refolded the note, tucked it back safely, and pulled into the street. The snow began again, soft, deliberate flakes tapping against the windshield. As she drove toward home, her jaw set a little harder. Whitney had taken enough in life. She wouldn't take anything more in death. The following Monday brought the kind of cold that stung through gloves. The courthouse clock tower chimed 10 as Evelyn pulled into the narrow lot beside Leo Kern's law office, a low brick building with a frost-coated sign that read, "Kern and Associates, Probate, and Estate Law." She sat for a moment before going in, the engine idling, her reflection in the windshield soft under the pale morning light. The folder labeled Documents. Aaron rested on the passenger seat, perfectly square, perfectly heavy. She picked it up, pressed it against her coat, and stepped out into the cold. Inside, the heat hit her in a slow wave. Dry, faintly chemical, smelling of toner and old paper. Leo's receptionist offered a small, sympathetic smile and motioned toward his office. "He's ready for you, Mrs. Grant." Leo Kern rose when she entered, tall and deliberate in movement, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. "Evelyn," he said softly, "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." Evelyn managed a nod, her voice measured. "Aaron trusted you." "I took that seriously." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk, where a neat stack of folders waited. Behind him, a framed photo of the Nebraska plains hung on the wall, endless fields under a pale horizon. Leo opened one of the folders, flipping through pages with care. "Your son updated his will 2 months ago," he said, his tone precise, professional but not cold. "It was notarized, witnessed, and registered properly. Every I dotted, every T crossed." Evelyn's fingers tightened around her handbag. 2 months, she murmured. He didn't say a word. "He wanted to spare you the conversation," Leo said, "but he made his intentions very clear." He turned the document toward her, tapping one section near the bottom. "Aaron Grant bequeaths all personal and real property, including residence, accounts, and investments, to Evelyn M. Grant." The words sat there in black ink, stark against white paper. Everything. No conditions. No contingencies. "Whitney's name doesn't appear anywhere," Leo continued, voice steady. "Not as a contingent beneficiary. Not even as an executor." Evelyn didn't speak at first. She stared at the signature, Aaron's strong pen stroke, a flourish at the end she recognized from birthday cards. "He knew what she'd do," she said finally. The door opened quietly behind her. Pam slipped in, clutching a paper cup of coffee. "Sorry, traffic," she murmured, then took a seat beside Evelyn. Leo handed her a copy of the will. Pam scanned it once, then again, her expression tightening. "He knew exactly what she'd pull," she said under her breath. "He just beat her to it." Leo folded his hands. "He also left a letter for the record, not to be public, but for you to keep." He slid an envelope across the desk. "It explains why he structured it this way." Evelyn looked down at the envelope, her name written in Aaron's careful handwriting again. "Mom." "Just that." Pam's eyes softened. "You gonna open it?" "Not yet," Evelyn said quietly. "Not until I need to." Leo leaned back slightly. "For now, You'll need to sign acknowledgement of receipt. I'll file the notice of ownership transfer with the county clerk today. You'll have full legal control of all estate assets by next week. Pam gave a low whistle. That'll light a fire under Whitney. Evelyn looked up, unflinching. Let her burn. Leo adjusted his glasses, a faint smile ghosting across his face. Then we're done here. Keep that letter somewhere safe, Mrs. Grant. Everything he wanted you to have. It's protected. Evelyn stood, the paper folder clasped close again. The office felt warmer now, but she couldn't shake the chill beneath her ribs. She thanked Leo, shook his hand firmly, and walked with Pam back to the car. Outside, the wind carried the faintest smell of wood smoke from somewhere down the street. Pam tucked her arm through Evelyn's. You okay? Evelyn nodded once. I will be. They reached the car, frost glimmering on the hood. Evelyn paused before opening the door, the envelope still in her hand. Pam tilted her head. What are you thinking? That it's all written down, Evelyn said, her breath clouding the air. Every word that matters. And she won't see a single one of them coming. She slid into the driver's seat, the letter resting on the folder beside her. Both sealed, both absolute. Through the windshield, the courthouse clock struck 11. Somewhere out there, Whitney Grant was probably rehearsing her next performance. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin, knowing line. She turned the key, the engine shuddered to life, and the heater began to hum. By Wednesday, the house had gone too quiet. The kind of quiet that filled the walls and pressed down on Evelyn's shoulders as she moved from room to room. Every clock tick sounded louder. Every floorboard groaned like it remembered who used to walk across it. The first voicemail came before dawn. The ringtone sliced through the silence, sharp and intrusive. Evelyn blinked at the screen. Whitney Grant. She let it ring out. Then came the voicemail chime. Evelyn. Whitney's voice trembled, coated in a performance of grief that had already worn thin. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about Aaron, about everything he wanted for us. I know he wanted me to have the house. I know it. Please, can we just talk? Evelyn deleted it with a single press. By mid-morning, 5 more messages waited, each one longer, more desperate, more self-assured. The second was syrupy. You and I are all that's left of him. We should take care of each other. The third cracked around the edges. I found his old insurance statements. My name's on some of them. You know. That must mean something. The fourth came with anger. I don't understand why you're shutting me out. You think this is what Aaron wanted? To see us fight? The fifth was quieter, chilling in its calm. I'm not going away, Evelyn. I deserve what's mine. And the sixth, just a long breath and the faint sound of a sob before the line went dead. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, the phone face down beside her. The coffee in her mug had gone cold hours ago. The envelope from Leo still lay unopened on the counter, its corners slightly bent now from her fingertips. She exhaled, slow and deliberate, and set the phone aside. Instead, she went to the hall closet, the one she hadn't opened since Aaron's things were brought home. Inside sat a plain cardboard box marked with his handwriting. Photos plus keepsakes. She carried it to the dining table, brushed a layer of dust from the top, and lifted the lid. The smell hit her first. Cedar, faint cologne, and the dry paper scent of time. Inside were photographs stacked in uneven piles, old postcards, a few of Aaron's college notebooks, and one navy blue tie he'd worn for interviews. She sifted through the photos. Aaron at Little League, Aaron in his first car, Aaron at his wedding beside Whitney, both of them smiling too wide. That one she turned face down. At the very bottom, folded into a small plastic sleeve, was a note. She recognized it immediately. The same notepaper he always kept on his desk. She slid it out, her thumb brushing the corner. The handwriting was strong, slanted slightly right. "Mom, don't let her touch it." Her breath caught. She'd seen that line before, the same one she carried in her coat pocket the day of the funeral. But this version was dated 2 weeks before his heart stopped. Evelyn sank into the chair, the paper trembling just enough for her to notice. It wasn't grief this time. It was something quieter, firmer. She set the note on top of the will folder. Then, one by one, she gathered the scattered photos and arranged them neatly inside the box again, careful not to look too long at any one image. When she closed the lid, the sound of it clicking shut felt final. The phone buzzed again on the counter. Another call. Same name. Evelyn let it ring until it stopped. She deleted all 6 voicemails, then blocked the number without hesitation. For the first time that day, the house felt still. Not empty, but claimed. Outside, the wind howled against the siding, rattling a loose shutter like a hand knocking from the other side. She ignored it, reached for the folder, and slid the note into the same file where Aaron's will rested. A perfect fit. His final line folded into legal permanence. Evelyn smoothed her palm over the closed folder and whispered, "I won't." In the next room, the answering machine light blinked once more, faint red against the dark. Another message. Evelyn didn't move to hear it, but the final words on the recording carried through the thin walls anyway, muffled but unmistakable. "You'll regret ignoring me." The machine clicked off, and the house fell silent again, except for the quiet hum of the furnace kicking on, steady and patient, like the sound of a woman waiting for her moment. The sky over Omaha was the color of wet steel that morning, heavy, low, and indecisive. Evelyn parked along the curb outside the Douglas County Courthouse, her breath fogging the windshield as she stared up at the sandstone steps. The building looked older than it was, its windows dark with condensation, its flag hanging limp in the cold. She sat for a long moment before getting out. On the passenger seat, the folder rested between her gloves and purse, the top corner frayed slightly where she'd opened it too many times. She smoothed it once, exhaled, and stepped into the biting air. Inside, the courthouse smelled of polish and paper, bureaucracy disguised as order. A few people shuffled through the lobby, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Evelyn found the probate records office tucked behind a frosted glass door marked County Clerk, Estate Filings. The woman behind the counter looked younger than Evelyn expected. Late 20s, sharp eyes, hair in a neat bun. Her name tag read Sadie Knox. "Morning," Sadie said, her tone brisk but kind. "Can I help you?" Evelyn slid the folder across the counter. "I'm here to file notice of ownership transfer, my son's estate." Sadie nodded, flipping through the documents with quick, practiced motions. "You're Evelyn Grant?" "Yes." Sadie's brow softened slightly as she scanned the pages. "I'm sorry for your loss." Evelyn gave the polite nod of someone who's heard the line too often to register it anymore. "Thank you." Sadie worked in silence for a moment, her pen clicking against the desk. Then she looked up. "Everything looks in order. Mr. Kern's office did clean work?" "Leo always does." Sadie smiled faintly. "He's one of the few who still files paper originals. Makes my job easier." She disappeared into a back room for a few minutes, the sound of a copier humming behind the door. Evelyn glanced around the office. Rows of beige filing cabinets lined the walls, their drawers labeled by last names, generations of lives condensed into ink and signatures. The fluorescent light above flickered once, then steadied. When Sadie returned, she carried 2 sets of papers and a stamped certificate. "Here we go," she said, sliding them across the counter. "Property deed, bank holdings, and vehicle title. All legally transferred to you under his final will and testament." Evelyn traced a finger over Aaron's signature. steady and certain, exactly as she remembered. Sadie leaned closer, lowering her voice. I checked the deed myself. Signed, notarized, witnessed, ironclad. Evelyn met her eyes. So there's no room for dispute. Not unless someone can raise the dead. A thin smile ghosted across Evelyn's face. Good. Sadie returned the smile, softer this time. You'd be surprised how often families fight over things the paperwork already decided. Evelyn's answer was measured, calm. Not this family. Not anymore. The door behind her creaked open. The sound of high heels on tile followed, hurried, uneven. Evelyn didn't turn. Excuse me, a familiar voice said, watery and loud. Whitney. Sadie's expression flickered with recognition. She'd clearly seen this before. Whitney stood in the doorway, coat too bright for a courthouse, sunglasses perched on her head despite the gloom. Her mascara was smudged. Maybe from tears, maybe from practice. She clutched a folded tissue in one hand and a stack of crumpled papers in the other. I'm here about my husband's estate, Whitney announced to no one in particular, her voice pitched high enough for the deputy near the hallway to notice. There's been a terrible mistake. Sadie's professionalism didn't waver. If you'd like to make an appointment, ma'am, we can. It's mine, Whitney's voice cracked. Aaron's house. He wanted me to have it. The deputy took a cautious step closer, already weary. Ma'am, you'll need to lower your voice. Whitney dabbed at her eyes, fake sob catching in her throat. I'm his wife. You can't just hand everything to her. Evelyn gathered her stamped papers without a word. Her movements were deliberate, practiced. She turned, her gaze sliding over Whitney like she was part of the furniture. Whitney froze mid-breath. Evelyn, please. But Evelyn didn't stop. She walked straight past her, heels quiet on the tile, expression unreadable. Sadie's voice followed softly. Have a good day, Mrs. Grant. Outside, the wind slapped against Evelyn's face, sharp with sleet. Pam was waiting near the corner, parked in her blue sedan, window rolled down halfway. A styrofoam cup of coffee steamed in her gloved hand. Thought you might need this, Pam said, passing it over. Evelyn accepted it gratefully, the heat seeping into her fingers. She was there. Pam's brows lifted. At the courthouse? Just now, putting on a show. Pam smirked. Some people mistake noise for leverage. Evelyn took a slow sip. She'll find out soon enough. There's no leverage without proof. Pam tilted her head toward the courthouse doors. What did they give you? Evelyn held up the stamped documents, edges catching the light. Everything that was his. Pam grinned. Guess that makes it official. Evelyn watched the courthouse steps where Whitney now stood outside, arguing with the deputy who'd followed her out. The sleet caught in her hair, mascara running, voice rising against the cold. Evelyn turned back to Pam, voice calm and final. It was official the moment he signed it. They drove off as the first flakes of heavier snow began to fall, swirling around the courthouse like paper torn from the sky. The summons arrived on a Thursday, folded, official, and smug in its language. Evelyn found it wedged between her electric bill and a church newsletter, petition to contest last will and testament of Aaron Grant. The words didn't shock her, she'd been waiting for them. She placed the envelope on the counter, next to her coffee cup, and dialed Leo. I figured this was coming, he said, his tone dry as ever. Her attorney's name is Givens. He's loud, but lazy. Will it hold? Not a chance, but we'll treat it like it could. By Monday morning, Evelyn and Leo sat in his office surrounded by towers of folders. Each page bore a small blue stamp, date, time, initial. Leo was meticulous, almost surgical in the way he organized his defense. Every document, every signature, every witness statement, he said, handing her a neatly clipped packet. Even her attorney won't be able to twist this one. Evelyn leafed through the pages, Her son's will, the transfer deeds, Aaron's final letter to Leo written in his usual blunt style. She'll come for it. Don't let her have it. Leo noticed her hesitation. That letter is gold, he said. Shows clear intent. No coercion, no confusion. He knew exactly what he wanted. Evelyn nodded, setting the papers back in order. He always did. The county courtroom was colder than it looked. Beige walls, stiff-backed benches, a flag drooping behind the judge's seat. The air smelled faintly of coffee and damp coats. Whitney arrived flanked by her attorney, wearing black again, but this time cut to flatter, not mourn. Her hair was glossy, her makeup careful, tragedy staged for the record. She dabbed at her eyes as she passed Evelyn, whispering something that sounded like, "heartless." Evelyn didn't respond. She sat perfectly still beside Leo, hands folded in her lap, the same calm she'd carried through every meeting, every funeral detail. The clerk called the case. Givens rose, a large man in an ill-fitting suit who spoke with more volume than conviction. "Your Honor," he began, "we believe the decedent's mother exerted undue influence over her son, persuading him to alter his will under emotional distress." The judge, a gray-haired man named Hendricks, leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. "You have evidence of that?" Givens adjusted his tie. "We have testimony that Aaron's relationship with his wife was loving and ongoing." "Testimony from whom?" Hendricks cut in. "Mrs. Grant herself," Givens said, gesturing toward Whitney. The judge sighed. "So, from the plaintiff." Givens blinked. "Yes, Your Honor." Leo stood next, calm as winter. "Your Honor, my client has provided not only a notarized will, but a supplemental letter from the decedent himself, written in his own hand 2 weeks before his death, confirming his intent. We also have bank statements, witness affidavits, and time-stamped filings. Every page has been verified." He handed a thick folder to the bailiff, who delivered it to the bench. Hendricks flipped through it silently for a long minute, the shuffle of paper the only sound in the room. Whitney sniffled loudly, reaching for a tissue. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was clipped. "Mrs. Grant," he said, looking at Whitney, "did your husband ever tell you he intended to amend his will in your favor?" Whitney's eyes darted toward her attorney. He said he'd take care of me. That's what he always said." "Any written communication to that effect?" "No, but then this court must rely on what exists, not what's imagined." Hendricks set the folder down, with finality. Whitney's performance cracked. "He wouldn't just leave me with nothing. This has to be fraud." The judge's eyes hardened. "Fraud requires fabrication, Mrs. Grant. What I see here is clarity. Every signature matches, every document aligns. This is airtight." The words hung in the air like a closing door. Whitney began to cry, soft at first, then louder, pulling at the tissue like it might erase the verdict. Evelyn didn't move. Her hands stayed folded, her eyes steady on the judge, not on Whitney. There was no gloating, no visible relief. Just stillness, the kind that comes when truth no longer needs defending. Judge Hendricks adjusted his glasses, tone turning final. Under Nebraska statute, the will stands as written. Mrs. Whitney Grant is entitled to nothing. The courtroom exhaled in one collective shift. A murmur, a cough, a chair squeak. Whitney's sobs sharpened into something like a hiss. Leo placed a quiet hand on Evelyn's arm. "It's over," he said softly. But Evelyn didn't answer. Her gaze had drifted to the clerk's desk, to the thick seal being pressed into the court's final copy of Aaron's will. The metal stamp came down with a heavy, irreversible click. As they left the courtroom, Whitney's voice followed them, brittle, furious. "You think you've won, old woman? You think this is done?" Evelyn paused at the door, the faintest trace of a smile touching her lips. "No," she murmured, almost to herself. It's just beginning. She stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and walked toward the exit without looking back. The first tremor of it reached Evelyn through Pam's voice, not a screen. Don't check Facebook, Pam said flatly over the phone. She's at it again. Evelyn was sitting at the kitchen table, sunlight pale against the frost on the window panes. The coffee beside her had long gone cold. At what? Pam sighed. You'll see it soon enough. I just wanted you to hear it from me first. Evelyn clicked her phone awake anyway. She didn't have to scroll far. Whitney's face was everywhere. The video was shot in the front seat of a car, windows fogged, seatbelt cutting diagonally across her chest. Her voice shook, but her eyes glittered with anger. I lost everything because of her. My husband's mother, Evelyn Grant, stole my future. She manipulated Aaron when he was weak. She took the house, the savings, everything we built together. She pressed her palm to her heart, letting her voice break in just the right places. I just want what's fair. The comments were a storm, some sympathetic, most not. Lady, it's called a will for a reason. Pretty sure that's not how probate works. Sounds like she married for the house. And the one that made Evelyn close her phone. Some people mistake love for ownership. By evening, the video had climbed, past 30,000 views. Local gossip pages picked it up. One headline even called it, The Widow versus the Mother. Pam arrived just after sundown, a pie tin wrapped in foil balanced on one arm. Apple cinnamon, she announced. For morale. Evelyn opened the door wider. You shouldn't have wasted your crust on her nonsense. Pam set the pie on the counter and dropped her purse by the chair. Oh, please. She's not worth the calories. But the internet sure thinks she is. She pulled out her phone, scrolled, and snorted. Half the town's laughing at her. Someone even made a remix. Evelyn arched an eyebrow. A remix? Pam tapped the screen. Whitney's voice played in a loop, chopped and layered over dramatic piano music. She stole my future. My future. My future. Despite herself, Evelyn's mouth twitched. Cruel world. Entertaining, though, Pam said, grinning. You gonna respond? Evelyn shook her head. No need. I'm not feeding her performance. She reached for her laptop and, with 3 careful clicks, blocked Whitney on every platform. Pam nodded approvingly. Good. I brought you something else, too. From her coat pocket, she pulled a small box and dropped it onto the table. A new lock. Figured she might get bold now that she's famous. Evelyn turned it over in her hand, the cold metal catching the kitchen light. You think she'd come here? Pam's expression hardened. I think she'll do anything that lets her feel relevant. Outside, the snow had started again, slow flakes falling across the yard, the kind that landed without sound. Evelyn watched them from the kitchen window. Her garden sat buried beneath a thin crust of ice and neglect, rows of frozen soil she hadn't touched since fall. I was going to plant new bulbs in spring, she murmured. Pam glanced at her. No reason you can't start now. Evelyn pulled on her gloves and coat, ignoring Pam's protest, and stepped into the yard. The cold air cut her lungs sharp, but she didn't mind. The earth was stiff beneath her boots. She knelt, pried the frozen dirt apart with her small trowel, and pressed in a handful of tulip bulbs. Pale, unassuming things that looked like nothing, yet promised everything. Each one went in with quiet precision, a rhythm almost meditative. She didn't rush, didn't look toward the road, where she knew headlights might pass, or pause. When she finally stood, the tips of her gloves were streaked with gray soil, her breath steady clouds in the air. She brushed her hands off and turned toward the house. Pam was waiting on the porch, holding 2 mugs of steaming cider. Planting season's a little early, don't you think? Evelyn smiled faintly. Just insurance. The ground remembers what you put in it. From across the street, A car idled, dark sedan, windows tinted. Pam noticed it first. You expecting company? Evelyn didn't look. Directly. No. The car lingered, exhaust fogging in the cold, then rolled away into the night. Pam's shoulders tensed. She's escalating. Evelyn took the mug from her hand, her voice even. Let her. The more she shows herself, the easier it'll be to prove who she really is. They stood side by side on the porch, the wind biting, the snow falling thicker now, the kind that softened everything but couldn't quite bury the truth. By the following Tuesday, Omaha's streets were lined with salt and dirty snow, the kind that clung stubbornly to curbs and boots. Evelyn parked outside Lincoln Federal Bank, the same branch where Aaron had opened his first checking account at 16. The air inside still smelled faintly of toner and peppermint, the holiday scent they never quite got rid of. She stepped into the lobby, pulling off her gloves as the heater blasted dry warmth across the marble floor. Her breath still felt like frost in her throat. Mrs. Grant, the teller greeted politely, eyes flicking up from her monitor. Mr. Baird said you'd be stopping in. Evelyn nodded, voice even. I won't take much of his time. The teller smiled with the forced brightness of someone trained to navigate other people's grief. He's expecting you. Right through those doors. Behind the glass partition, the bank manager, Greg Baird, rose when Evelyn entered. He was tall, early 50s, the sort of man who always wore a vest whether it was cold or not. His tone was gentle but brisk. Evelyn, I got Leo's fax first thing this morning. You're all set. Good, she said. I'd rather not give her another inch to twist. Baird's lips curved faintly. Already handled. Every one of Aaron's accounts has been properly transferred under the Todd filings. It's ironclad. Transfer on death. Evelyn remembered Leo explaining it. How Aaron had set everything up so the moment his heart stopped, it all bypassed probate. The paperwork had spoken before Whitney ever could. Evelyn sat down in the leather chair across from the desk. So if she tries again? Baird leaned back slightly. She can try, but she'll hit a wall. He wasn't exaggerating, because at that exact moment the elevator at the end of the lobby dinged open, and out stepped Whitney Grant, her coat a shade of white that somehow managed to look theatrical. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Whitney strode toward the counter, phone in hand, her voice rising before she even reached the teller. I need access to my husband's accounts, she said loudly. Aaron Grant, his widow. You should already have me on file. The teller glanced toward Baird's office window, where Evelyn now sat, visible behind the glass. Whitney followed the glance, and froze when she saw Evelyn. Her expression twisted from grief to fury in half a heartbeat. Evelyn didn't move. She simply folded her hands in her lap, meeting Whitney's glare with a yay, silence that was far louder than any rebuttal. Whitney turned back to the teller, her voice tightening. You can't let her block me. I was his wife. I'm owed access. Baird stepped out of his office, calm but unyielding. Mrs. Grant, we've already reviewed the documents. All of Mr. Aaron Grant's accounts were placed under transfer on death designation. His mother is the sole beneficiary. That's not possible, Whitney snapped. He wouldn't. It's not only possible, Baird said evenly. It's legally binding. Whitney's cheeks flushed. Then I want to see the documents myself. Baird nodded toward the door. You're welcome to request them through your attorney, but until then, there's nothing for you to see. The teller's fingers hovered near the security call button. Whitney's voice cracked on the next word. This isn't fair. Evelyn rose slowly, gathering her purse. Her voice was low but steady. It's not about fair, Whitney. It's about finished. Whitney blinked, momentarily thrown by the calmness of it. You think this is over? Evelyn didn't answer. She just stepped past her, scent of cold wool and faint lilac trailing as she walked toward the door. Behind her, Whitney's anger erupted into chaos. Papers slapped onto the counter, her voice rising. "You're all enabling her. I'll sue this bank." Baird didn't even flinch. He turned back toward his office, speaking just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mrs. Grant," he called, meaning Evelyn this time. "Mr. Kern just faxed additional confirmation. Everything remains under your sole control. She has no legal standing." The words echoed across the marble, soft but absolute. Evelyn didn't look back. She pushed through the glass doors and into the freezing air, the city's wind biting sharp against her cheeks. Her reflection caught briefly in the window. Calm, unreadable. Pam's car waited at the curb, idling. She leaned out, eyebrows raised. That sounded like a circus from here. Evelyn slid in, fastening her seatbelt. "It's over." Pam smirked. "You sure?" "I heard she's allergic to accepting consequences." Evelyn watched the snow swirl around the traffic light ahead, her tone flat. "Let her choke on them, then." They drove off in silence for a while, the heater humming softly. As they turned the corner, Evelyn's phone buzzed with a new voicemail alert. From an unknown number. She didn't check it, not yet. But the preview line flashed across the screen before fading. "You think paperwork can stop me?" Evelyn powered the phone off and set it face down in her lap. The following week brought a brief thaw. One of those false Nebraska reprieves where the snow melted just enough to trick the sidewalks into mud. Evelyn watched it drip from her eaves as she balanced her checkbook at the kitchen counter. Numbers, columns, decimals. The kind of order she could still control. She'd already decided what to do with part of it. Aaron's money shouldn't sit and gather dust like guilt. It needed to breathe, to become something that mattered. The phone rang mid-afternoon. "Mrs. Grant?" a woman's voice said. "This is Karen Lowe, director at the West Omaha Community Library. I wanted to thank you for your generous donation. We'd like to dedicate one of our reading rooms in your son's memory." Evelyn hesitated, pen hovering above her notepad. "That's not necessary." "Oh, we insist," Karen said warmly. "He was a regular, wasn't he? We found his old library card in our archives. Same handwriting, still neat as a pin." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Yes. He used to spend his Saturdays there when he was little. Always wanted his own corner of quiet." "Then we'll make sure he has one," Karen replied. "Would you be open to a small ceremony? Nothing formal, just a plaque and a few words." Evelyn agreed, her voice steady. "That would be fine." 2 weeks later, the library smelled like fresh paint and paper dust, that warm, sweet scent of clean shelves and polished wood. A brass plaque waited to be unveiled above a doorway that read, "Aaron Grant Memorial Reading Room," in small, elegant lettering. Pam was already there, standing on a step stool, rearranging a stack of books on a display table. "It needed a softer touch," she said, without turning. They had all the covers facing out like a department store. Evelyn set a framed photo on the shelf. Aaron, graduation cap crooked, grin easy. The glass caught the afternoon light from the tall windows and cast a soft reflection over the polished oak. Pam stepped down from the stool and stood beside her. "That's a good one. He looks proud." "He was," Evelyn murmured, "even when life gave him less than he deserved." Karen approached, clipboard in hand, cheeks flushed from rushing. "Everything's ready, just a few local donors, the staff, some press from the community column. Nothing fancy." "I prefer it that way," Evelyn said. As people began to gather, she drifted toward the corner of the room, away from the chatter, away from the polite condolences that always came wrapped in platitudes. She let her eyes wander the space instead. The soft chairs, the quiet hum of a new heater, the sunlight painting long rectangles across the floor. Pam joined her, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "You did good, Evie." Evelyn took one, still watching the plaque. "He used to hide in libraries during storms, she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. Said the quiet made the thunder sound polite. Pam chuckled. Sounds like him. Outside, through the broad front windows, a car idled along 90th Street. White SUV, engine running. Evelyn noticed it without reacting. The driver's side window was cracked just enough for a puff of vapor to escape. Whitney. Her blonde hair caught the sunlight in sharp strands as she leaned toward the glass, watching through her oversized sunglasses. From this distance, she looked like part of the reflection, another ghost in the pane. Pam followed Evelyn's gaze. You've got company. Evelyn's voice didn't waver. She's running out of places to haunt. Karen's voice carried from the front of the room. Mrs. Grant? Would you like to say a few words? Evelyn turned back, leaving the window behind. Just one, she said softly, then stepped forward. When she reached the podium, the chatter hushed. She placed her hand lightly on the plaque, her fingertips tracing Aaron's name. He loved stories, she said simply. He believed they could outlast anything. I suppose he was right. A quiet murmur of approval followed. Cameras clicked. She stepped away, coffee still warm in her hand, and moved back toward the window. The SUV was gone. Only tire tracks remained in the slush. Pam exhaled beside her. Maybe she finally got the hint. Evelyn shook her head. She doesn't take hints. She takes risks. They left the library together as the sun dipped low, painting the street in gold and gray. The plaque gleamed behind them through the glass, Aaron's name catching the last light of the day. Evelyn paused before unlocking her car, eyes narrowing. A folded piece of paper was tucked beneath her windshield wiper. Pam noticed it too. Want me to grab it? No, Evelyn said, reaching for it herself. The handwriting was jagged, hurried, but familiar. One line. Enjoy spending what isn't yours. Pam's face hardened. You think? Evelyn interrupted quietly. I don't think. I know. She folded the note neatly and slid it into her coat pocket. The snow had hardened overnight, crisp enough to crunch under boots. Evelyn watched it glint through her kitchen window as the kettle hissed on the stove. The folded note from the library parking lot still sat on the counter, untouched since the day she found it. She hadn't shown it to Leo. Not yet. She wanted to see how far Whitney would go on her own. The mail arrived just after noon. A thump against the door, followed by the retreating sound of tires on ice. Evelyn crossed the living room and picked up the stack. Bills, a catalog, and a plain white envelope with no return address. The handwriting stopped her cold. The same curling, overconfident loops. Whitney. She set the other envelopes aside and stared at this one for a long moment before sitting at the table. The ticking of the kitchen clock seemed to grow louder with every second. When she finally tore it open, the smell of cheap perfume drifted out. Whitney's signature scent, the kind that overstayed its welcome. The first line was enough. Evelyn, I'm begging you, just the house, please. Evelyn didn't read another word. Her thumb found the shredder switch beside the desk, and the letter disappeared inch by inch into a slow hum of finality. The paper ribbon curled at her feet like something exercised. She exhaled, long and even, and opened the drawer beneath the counter. Inside lay a small folder labeled Posthumous Filings. Leo had told her once that there were ways to make even the dead's wishes safer. Ways to prevent the living from rewriting them. She picked up the phone and dialed his office. Leo Kern, came his familiar, calm voice. It's Evelyn. I need to secure Aaron's filings permanently. No challenges, no amendments, no after-the-fact surprises. I can file a motion to seal and reaffirm the record, he said, already sounding like he was halfway through the paperwork in his mind. Quietly, it'll make it impossible for anyone to contest or refile without court notice. That's what I want. Leo hesitated. She's escalating, isn't she? Evelyn's eyes flicked to the shredder bin. You could say that. I'll handle it, he promised. I'll send confirmation by tomorrow morning. Thank you, she said simply, then hung up. A soft knock came at the door a few minutes later. Pam's familiar voice followed. Open up, Evie. I come bearing sugar and moral support. Evelyn smiled in spite of herself. Both are welcome. Pam entered with her usual flair, scarf unwound, cheeks pink from the cold, a plate of lemon cookies balanced in one hand and a thermos of tea in the other. It's too damn quiet in here, she said, setting everything down on the table. It's been peaceful, Evelyn replied. That's your polite way of saying boring. Evelyn smirked. Boring's underrated. Pam poured the tea, steam curling into the air. To peace and paperwork, she toasted, raising her cup. Evelyn met the gesture. And to boundaries. They clinked cups softly, the sound small but steady. For a while, they sat in companionable silence, the kind that only old friends could manage. No need to fill the air, no need to explain the weight that lingered between sips. The house smelled faintly of lemon and chamomile, a fragile calm wrapping itself around them. Then Evelyn's phone buzzed on the counter. Once, twice, 3 times. Pam frowned. That doesn't sound like a social call. Evelyn rose, picked it up, and saw Leo Kern flashing on the screen. She answered on speaker. Leo, you filed already? I did, he said, his voice tight. Unusual for him. But something's come up. Pam straightened in her chair. That didn't sound like good news. Leo continued, each word deliberate. I just got an alert from the state record database. Someone filed a second version of Aaron's will. In Lancaster County. Different witnesses. Different notary. Pam's mouth fell open. You're kidding. Evelyn's knuckles whitened around the phone. Who? We don't have confirmation yet, Leo said grimly, but I've already contacted the clerk there. It's clearly doctored. Dates don't match. Signature spacing's off. Whoever did this didn't even bother to replicate Aaron's handwriting properly. Pam let out a low whistle. She's forging legal documents now? That's not desperate. That's criminal. Leo exhaled audibly. Exactly. Evelyn, listen carefully. Don't contact her. Don't respond. Don't post anything online. I'm sending Sadie Knox from the courthouse to cross-verify every page. We'll need your copy of the original for comparison. Evelyn's voice was quiet, almost too calm. You'll have it in the morning. Leo paused, then said gently, I told you she'd push past the law when the law didn't bend for her. Evelyn's eyes drifted to the shredder bin again, to the curling remains of Whitney's letter. Let her push, she said. She's about to find out what happens when paperwork fights back. Leo didn't respond, but Pam did. Evie, this is serious. If she's faking wills, I know, Evelyn said, turning to the window where the snow was starting again, soft and endless. But that's the thing about fraud, Pam, it always leaves fingerprints. She set the phone down, untouched tea cooling beside her, and stared into the night. By morning, the snow had stopped, leaving a hard, glittering crust over everything. Evelyn's breath fogged against the glass as she watched a county vehicle crawl to a stop in front of her house. The emblem on the door read, Douglas County Clerk's Office. Sadie Knox stepped out, coat buttoned high, a leather satchel slung over her shoulder. Her expression was all business, the same sharp focus Evelyn had seen at the courthouse. Morning, Mrs. Grant, Sadie said when Evelyn opened the door. I'm sorry we're meeting again under this kind of mess. Evelyn gestured her in. You've seen the forged will? Sadie nodded grimly. Leo faxed me copies late last night. I brought the Lancaster County version for verification. She opened her satchel and laid out 2 sets of papers on the kitchen table, one crisp and legitimate, the other a clumsy imitation. Even from across the table, Evelyn could see the difference. The ink on the fake document was heavy and uneven, the kind of cheap home printer ink that smudged if you looked at it wrong. Sadie tapped the fake signature line with her pen. See this? The loop in the G doesn't match your son's actual handwriting, and this notary, she pointed at a faint, barely legible stamp, doesn't exist in the Nebraska registry. I ran it twice. Evelyn leaned closer. So, it's not even a good forgery. Sadie's mouth tightened. Desperate people rarely are good criminals, but the intent's what matters. They spent the next half hour cataloging details. The witness names didn't correspond to any real addresses. The document header used an outdated county letterhead. Even the page numbering was off. One page skipped from 3 to 5. Sloppy, Sadie muttered. Evelyn opened her own folder, the one she'd guarded like a weapon for months. She spread the original will on the table, edges perfectly aligned, her son's signature flowing smoothly across the last page. Sadie compared them side by side. This one, she said, touching Aaron's original, is digitally time-stamped. Leo's firm used verified notary encryption, and I checked the county archive. Physical and digital copies match perfectly. There's no question which one's real. Evelyn sat back, folding her hands in her lap. So what happens now? Sadie straightened, professionalism hardening her tone. I'll be filing a full report with the Lancaster County Clerk this afternoon. Once the DA's office sees the forged notary seal and false witness signatures, they'll open a criminal inquiry. We're talking felony-level forgery, Mrs. Grant. Evelyn didn't flinch. She thought she could outright the truth. Sadie gave a small, almost respectful nod. And failed, spectacularly. Leo called while they were still going over the details. Evelyn put him on speaker. Sadie filled you in? He asked. She did, Evelyn replied. Good, the district attorney's office has already been notified. They're moving fast. Apparently, this isn't the first time our friend Whitney's name has popped up in questionable filings. She used a fake witness who's connected to a defunct notary service in Lincoln. Sadie's eyebrows shot up. That's bold. Stupid, Leo corrected. They'll trace it in hours. Pam arrived mid-call, shaking snow from her boots, holding a thermos of coffee like it was armor. You're not going to believe what I just saw online, she said. Whitney's been posting cryptic quotes about truth always coming out in time. Guess she's trying to spin this before it hits the news. Leo's tone turned razor-sharp through the speaker. If she's publicly implying the will's real, that's self-incrimination. The DA's office will eat that up. Pam poured coffee into mugs, sliding one to Evelyn. To poetic justice, she said dryly. Evelyn didn't toast. She just took a slow sip. I'm not celebrating until it's done. Leo's voice softened. It's close, Evelyn. The law's caught up to her this time. When the call ended, Sadie gathered her papers into neat stacks. I'll handle the rest, she said. Once the DA confirms charges, you'll be informed officially. Evelyn walked her to the door. You've been thorough, Ms. Knox. Thank you. Sadie gave a small smile. He raised a smart son, and you've honored that with the way you've handled all of this. Evelyn watched the county car pull away, its tires crunching over the ice. The house felt too still afterward, the kind of silence that hummed behind the ears. Pam stayed, reading Evelyn's face. You should feel something good right now, Pam said gently. Relief, maybe. Evelyn stared at the empty space on the table where the forgeries had been. I just feel tired. Pam nodded slowly. You've earned tired. Evelyn gave a faint, humorless smile. Maybe. But tired doesn't mean done. She walked to the window, staring out across her snow-covered yard. A faint trail of footprints led from the sidewalk toward her mailbox. Too fresh, too deliberate. Pam followed her gaze. Those weren't there when I came in. Evelyn's breath fogged against the glass. No, she said softly. They weren't. By Thursday morning, Evelyn's house felt heavier. Not haunted, just burdened by awareness. She couldn't stop thinking about those footprints, how they'd ended halfway up the walk, like someone had vanished mid-step. The wind had covered them overnight, but their memory lingered. She made coffee, the sound of the percolator grounding her, and went to the spare room, Aaron's old office. It still smelled faintly of cedar and printer ink. His books remained in alphabetical order, his framed army photo still straight on the wall. But something else caught her eye. Or rather, the absence of it. The small wooden case on his desk, the one that had once held his medals and folded veteran's flag, was empty. Evelyn froze. She checked the shelves. The tool chest from the garage, gone. A few of Aaron's collectible model cars, missing from their display cabinet. And the key to the storage unit, which she'd left in the drawer beneath his uniform, was no longer there. Her chest tightened, not in panic, but in recognition. Whitney. Within an hour, Leo was on the line. "Say that again?" he asked, incredulous. "She took them," Evelyn said quietly. "Or sent someone to. The door wasn't forced, but the lock feels wrong. You can tell when something's been handled too many times." Leo's sigh was deep, deliberate. "That's theft of estate property, plain and simple. I'll file a police report and an emergency property claim. You'll get them back." "I don't want them all back," Evelyn replied. Just what mattered to him. "That'll be up to the sheriff," Leo said. "But I'll make sure they understand what those items mean." By afternoon, a county sheriff's cruiser pulled into Whitney's driveway. Evelyn watched from her own car across the street, the air heavy with that post-snow damp that smelled faintly of salt and engine heat. Pam sat in the passenger seat beside her, chewing on a peppermint. "This is better than cable," Pam muttered. Evelyn didn't smile. "I'm not here to watch her punished, just corrected." The deputy knocked on Whitney's door twice. It opened slowly. Whitney appeared, pale and trembling, a robe pulled tight over her frame. The drama in her face had changed. Not grief this time, but disbelief that her consequences had finally arrived. "I don't know what you're talking about," she insisted, her voice carrying across the street. "Those were Aaron's. They belong to me." The deputy remained professional, reading from his clipboard. "Under the court's estate order, all personal and sentimental property listed in the verified inventory belongs to Mrs. Evelyn Grant, sole heir. I have a recovery order signed this morning." Whitney's voice cracked. You can't just take—" "It's not me taking anything," the deputy said. "It's the law returning it." He stepped past her, motioning to another officer waiting near the cruiser. Moments later, cardboard boxes began to appear on the porch, Aaron's name still visible on some half-torn stickers clinging to their sides. Evelyn watched without expression. She waited until the deputies finished, until Whitney's sobs shifted from resistance to exhaustion. Finally, the deputy approached her car. "Ma'am, we've recovered what we could verify." Evelyn stepped out, boots crunching over packed snow. She moved slowly, deliberately, toward the boxes stacked near Whitney's porch. Whitney stood beside them, mascara streaked, eyes red. "Take them," she said hoarsely. "Take everything. I don't even want to look at it anymore." Evelyn knelt, her gloved hands brushing through the contents. Tools, trophies, the faded case containing Aaron's folded flag. She lifted it gently, pressing a palm over the fabric's crisp edge. Beneath it, she found what she hadn't expected: a small velvet pouch. Inside, Aaron's dog tags, cool against her skin, and his wedding band, dulled from years of wear. She closed her fist around them, then looked up at Whitney. Their eyes met, one pair hollow, the other steady. "You never understood him," Evelyn said softly. "He wasn't what you could own." Whitney's lip trembled. "You think you're better than me?" "No," Evelyn said, standing. just different. She turned to the deputies. You can leave the rest. It's only things. Pam's voice came from behind her. Evie. Evelyn shook her head. Let her keep what's empty. Whitney sank onto the porch steps, burying her face in her hands as the deputies packed up what they'd come for. The wind carried the faint sound of her sobs, but Evelyn didn't stop. She walked back to the car, the velvet pouch clutched in her hand. Once inside, she opened her palm. The dog tags caught the afternoon light, Aaron's name shining in neat, precise lettering. She slipped the ring beside them, both resting against her lifeline like proof of something no one could forge. Pam exhaled softly. You okay? Evelyn's voice was steady. Closer than I've been. As they pulled away, Evelyn looked in the side mirror one last time. Whitney remained on the porch, small, broken, watching the cruiser drive off with the last of her borrowed life. By the time spring whispered its way into Omaha, the snow was gone, but the cold lingered in Evelyn's bones. The days had grown longer, but her house still felt cloaked in gray. Quieter, yes, but not quite settled. The first thing she did after the theft incident was walk into Leo's office without calling ahead. He didn't need an explanation. One look at her face told him this wasn't a conversation about grief anymore. I want it on record, she said, placing a folded sheet on his desk. A formal no-contact order. She's crossed enough lines. Leo adjusted his glasses, scanning the form. Restraining order, civil. We can tie it to the fraud case. That'll make it airtight. I want every gate closed, Evelyn replied. No calls, no visits, no contact through attorneys, not even through third parties. Leo nodded. I'll file it today. She'll be served within 48 hours. Evelyn turned to go but paused at the door. Leo, she said softly, when you send her the notice, make sure it's written plain. She won't respect anything that sounds polite. He smiled faintly. I'll make it sound like a law book fell on her. 2 weeks later, a clerk confirmed what Evelyn already knew in her gut. Whitney, Grant was officially barred from accessing or contesting any estates, financial accounts, or court records tied to Aaron's name. It was over in the legal sense, at least. Evelyn stood outside the courthouse afterward, the spring air brushing against her face. Across the street, Pam waited in her car, waving her over. Well? Pam asked when Evelyn climbed in. She's gone, Evelyn said simply. At least on paper. Pam let out a low whistle. That's one hell of a ghost eviction. Evelyn almost smiled. Paper holds better than prayers. Pam patted her shoulder. Speaking of paper, you need to update your own will. You've been talking about it since January. I already did, Evelyn said. Yesterday. Leo filed it first thing this morning. Pam raised a brow. You didn't tell me. You're listed as power of attorney, Evelyn said matter-of-factly. So I suppose I just did. Pam blinked, speechless for once. Evie, don't thank me, Evelyn interrupted gently. Just promise not to let anyone rewrite what's already right. Pam's eyes softened. You've got my word. The following week, Evelyn wrote another check. This one addressed to the West Omaha Community Foundation. The memo line read, Aaron Grant Memorial Scholarship Fund. She attached a note in her neat cursive, for students who believe doing right quietly still counts. Leo handled the legal end, ensuring the fund would live longer than any of them. Evelyn didn't need recognition. She needed continuity. Something cleaner than revenge. Something lasting. That Sunday, she and Pam drove to the cemetery. The grass had just begun to green, and the air smelled faintly of thawing earth and rain. Evelyn carried a bouquet of tulips, the same bulbs she'd planted months earlier, now blooming outside her kitchen window. Pam carried a thermos of coffee and a small tin of cookies. You think he'd mind us bringing snacks? She asked, as they walked between rows of stones. Evelyn smiled. He'd call it practical. They reached the grave, simple, unchanged. The brass plaque had weathered slightly, but it gleamed in the afternoon light. Evelyn knelt, brushing a stray leaf from the base, and laid the tulips across the soil. Pam poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. They sat on the small bench nearby, silence stretching between them. It wasn't heavy. It was the kind that let the heart breathe. After a long while, Pam said, "You did what needed doing, you know. You didn't have to, but you did." Evelyn's eyes stayed on the headstone. Justice isn't about needing to. It's about finishing the unfinished. The wind rustled through the trees, a soft, almost approving sound. Pam reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Found this in your mailbox yesterday," she said carefully. "Addressed to you. No return name. Figured you'd rather open it. Here." Evelyn hesitated. The handwriting was unfamiliar this time, careful even. She tore it open slowly, half expecting venom, half expecting nothing. Inside was a single piece of paper. No threats, no perfume. Just 5 typed words. "She's not done. Be ready." Pam leaned in. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Evelyn folded the note without answering. Her eyes drifted toward the distant road, where a lone car idled for just a beat, too long before driving away. She set the note beside the tulips, weighed it down with a smooth stone, and whispered, "Then neither am I." By late autumn, the maples along Evelyn's street had shed their leaves, leaving the air raw and brittle. The house, though warm and orderly, had begun to feel like a museum, full of memory but void of pulse. Each room whispered Aaron's absence differently: the scrape of a chair leg, the hollow creak in the hallway, the faint scent of cedar that refused to fade. She knew then what had to be done. The idea had come to her during a conversation with Leo, half idle and off the record. "You don't owe the world anything," he'd said, "but if you give it something in Aaron's name, it'll owe him forever." That night, she sat at her dining table, the same one where she'd once drafted letters, signed legal forms, and faced down loss with precision, and began writing again. This time, there was no legal language, no rebuttal, no defense, just intent. 2 weeks later, the house was in transition. Men in work boots came and went, measuring, replacing locks, painting rooms. Evelyn watched them quietly, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. The Veterans Foundation had accepted her offer, a full donation of the property to serve as transitional housing for service members returning home. Pam arrived one morning carrying croissants and skepticism. "You're sure about this?" she asked, stepping over a toolbox in the entryway. Evelyn nodded. "Aaron would have wanted it used, not preserved." Pam scanned the freshly painted walls, now a soft eggshell white. "You could have rented it out, kept a piece of him." "This is keeping a piece of him," Evelyn said simply. "He believed in new beginnings. I'm just giving someone else one." She led Pam upstairs to Aaron's old room, unchanged except for the sunlight now spilling across the hardwood floor. On the neatly made bed sat a sealed envelope, handwritten in Evelyn's steady script. Pam tilted her head. "What's that?" "A letter," Evelyn said, placing it on the pillow. "For whoever sleeps here next?" Pam smiled softly. "What did you write?" Evelyn hesitated, then answered, "Make this a home again." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The dedication day came in early December. The sky was a wash of silver, the air smelling faintly of snow. A small crowd gathered in the front yard. Local reporters, members of the Veterans Outreach Program, and a few quiet neighbors who'd known Aaron since childhood. A brass plaque gleamed against the new porch railing, "Aaron's Place." A transitional home for those starting over. Evelyn stood beside Pam, both bundled in thick coats, watching the ceremony unfold. The director spoke kindly, recounting Aaron's service, his reputation for mentoring younger recruits, his stubborn optimism. Evelyn barely heard the words. She was listening instead to the rhythm of boots on wood, the laughter of a young family unpacking inside, the creak of a door that finally opened again. When the ribbon was cut, applause scattered into the cold air. Pam leaned in. "You did it, Evie. You let go the right way." Evelyn's gaze lingered on the open doorway. "No," she murmured. "I just put things back where they belonged." From the street, she could see new curtains already being hung in Aaron's window. Light-colored ones that caught the winter sun. For the first time in months, the house didn't look heavy anymore. It looked alive. A week later, Whitney found out. Evelyn didn't need to hear it from her. Gossip traveled faster than snow in Omaha. A neighbor mentioned that Whitney had gone off online again, ranting about betrayal, legacy, and theft by sainthood. The post disappeared within hours, drowned in comments that told her to move on. Pam read one aloud while they were baking in Evelyn's kitchen. Someone wrote, "You can't haunt someone who's already made peace." I might frame that. Evelyn just chuckled faintly, pressing a thumbprint into a sugar cookie. Let her keep talking. Noise fades faster than good deeds. The doorbell rang mid-afternoon. It wasn't Pam's tone that changed. It was Evelyn's posture. She wiped her hands, opened the door, and found Leo standing there, coat dusted with frost and a familiar folder tucked under his arm. "Didn't expect to see you today," she said. "You'll want to sit for this one," he replied. Pam appeared behind her, towel over her shoulder. "That sounds fun." Leo stepped inside, lowering his voice. The district attorney's office called. Whitney Grant is officially under investigation, not just for the fake will, but for multiple counts of document tampering and forgery across county lines. Pam let out a low whistle. They're finally putting her name where it belongs, on a charge sheet. Evelyn leaned against the counter, the news landing not as triumph, but as quiet validation. What happens next? Leo's expression was calm but resolute. They'll build the case. You won't need to testify unless she contests it. But Evelyn, they have enough to make it stick. Evelyn nodded once, her voice soft. Good. Maybe she'll learn the same thing Aaron always knew. Paper doesn't lie. Leo smiled faintly. You raised him well. As he left, Pam nudged Evelyn's arm. So, is this where you finally breathe? Evelyn looked toward the window. Outside, a young boy from the Veterans Program was hanging a wreath on Aaron's front door. The snow had started again. Soft, silent, forgiving. She exhaled slowly. Maybe just for a minute. The courthouse sat under a sky the color of tin, hard, metallic, unfeeling. But Evelyn wasn't there to see it. She sat instead at her kitchen table, a cup of Earl Grey cooling beside a half-finished crossword. Pam sat across from her, cross-legged nursing coffee that had gone lukewarm 20 minutes ago. Between them, Leo's text from that morning glowed on Evelyn's phone. Jury seated, shouldn't take long. Pam exhaled. You really don't want to go? Evelyn shook her head slowly. There's nothing left for me to watch. The outcome's already written. She just hasn't read it yet. Pam tilted her head. You're sure you won't regret not seeing her face when it lands? I've seen her face enough, Evelyn said, and regret doesn't need an audience. Outside, sleet pattered against the window. The garden beds, still half frozen, looked like a sketch of spring not yet filled in. Evelyn's gloves sat by the door, a reminder that some things could wait until after justice thawed. By late afternoon, the phone buzzed again. Leo's name flashed on the screen. Evelyn picked up on the second ring. It's done, Leo said simply. His voice carried no triumph, just the kind of finality that didn't need embellishment. The jury found her guilty on all counts: attempted fraud, forgery, and document tampering. Sentencing next month. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. Did she say anything? Leo hesitated. She tried to. The judge cut her off before she could start spinning. He said, and I quote, "Mrs. Grant, silence will serve you better than spectacle ever did." Pam smirked, leaning closer to the phone. "Remind me to send that judge a pie." Leo's laugh was quiet but tired. "I'll text you the transcript once it's filed." "Don't," Evelyn said softly. "I don't need to read it. I just need to know it's true." "It is," Leo said. "Rest easy, Evelyn. You've earned it." When the call ended, Evelyn sat still for a long time. Pam waited, not speaking, just studying her. Finally, Evelyn reached for the envelope that had arrived that morning. County seal, official and unyielding. She slid it open carefully, removed the letter inside, and scanned the first few lines. This document serves as formal notification of conviction in the case of State of Nebraska versus Whitney Grant. That was enough. She folded it once, slipped it back into the envelope, and closed it without a smile. Pam frowned slightly. "That's it? No toast? No victory lap? No bottle of something nice?" Evelyn shook her head. "Closure isn't supposed to be loud." Pam looked around the quiet kitchen. "You know, Evie, sometimes I can't tell if you're the calmest woman I know or the coldest." Evelyn's gaze softened. "They're not that different. One just costs less." The next morning, she woke early. The clouds had lifted, the kind of fragile brightness that follows a storm. She filled her thermos, packed her gardening gloves, and drove toward the West Omaha Community Library. The ground around the entrance was thawing, damp, dark, rich with promise. Evelyn knelt at the edge of the walkway, the smell of wet earth rising as she pressed new bulbs into the soil. Daffodils this time. She liked that they found light first. Karen, the library director, spotted her from inside and came out with a smile. "You didn't have to do that, you know. We've got maintenance for this sort of thing." Evelyn brushed soil from her gloves. "Some things need to be done by hand." Karen nodded. "Erin's reading room had its first book club meeting last night," she said. "Full house. They talked about the old man and the sea. One of the veterans said the ending reminded him of starting over, how you can lose everything and still keep your dignity." Evelyn smiled faintly. "He would have liked that." "Would you like to come in and see?" Karen offered. "Not yet," Evelyn said. "It's theirs now." Karen lingered for a moment, then went back inside. Evelyn stayed kneeling, pressing the last bulb into place. The earth was cold but alive beneath her palms. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Pam's car pulled up behind her a few minutes later. She stepped out holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're going to turn that library into a garden if you keep at it." "Could be worse legacies," Evelyn said, standing and dusting off her knees. Pam handed her a cup. "So, now that justice is served, what do you do with all this quiet?" Evelyn looked at the horizon, where the morning light stretched wide across the thawing street. "I think I start something new." Pam smiled. "Like what?" Evelyn's eyes drifted toward Erin's reading room, its window glowing warm in the sunlight. "I'll know when I feel it." She sipped her coffee, wind brushing her hair. The house was quiet again, not empty, not haunted, just quiet in a way that finally felt like permission. The trial had ended, the paperwork was sealed, and the world had moved on. But Evelyn hadn't. Not completely. There was one last thing to do. The safety box sat on her dining table, its brushed steel reflecting the afternoon light that streamed through the lace curtains. It wasn't large, just enough space for the documents that had decided the course of everything. Her son's will, the legal filings, the letter Erin had written before his heart gave out. She placed each item inside carefully, as though she were tucking him in one last time. The will went first, folded along its crease and wrapped in a plastic sleeve Leo had given her for safekeeping. Beneath it, she laid the court's stamped rulings, each bearing the hard proof that truth had prevailed in ink and seal. Then came the frame. Aaron's handwriting stared up at her from behind the glass, strong and certain. "Mom, don't let her touch it." Her fingers lingered on the words, tracing the indents left by his pen. It wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a promise she had kept. When she closed the box and turned the key, the faint click echoed through the room, clean, final, and satisfying in its simplicity. Evelyn carried it to the hall closet and slid it onto the top shelf, right beside a small cedar box that held his dog tags and wedding band. For the first time, she didn't feel the weight of what was missing. She felt what remained. The late afternoon light began to dim, soft gold turning to gray. Evelyn lit a single candle by Aaron's photo on the mantel, the one taken the summer before he married Whitney. His smile was wide, genuine, untouched by all that had followed. The flame's reflection danced across his face like a memory she wasn't ready to let go of, but no longer had to fight to keep. The house smelled faintly of wax and pine. She left the candle burning and stepped outside, pulling her cardigan tight against the cold. The garden path stretched ahead of her, winding through the backyard the way Aaron had built it years ago, bricks uneven but deliberate, each one pressed by his hands. The tulips she'd planted months before had wilted, their stems bending low, but new shoots were pushing through the frost. She walked slowly, her boots crunching against the thin crust of snow. The sky above Omaha was heavy with cloud, the kind that promised another round of winter before spring could settle for good. Halfway down the path, she stopped by the small wooden bench Aaron had built for her one Mother's Day. Its paint had faded, but the initials he'd carved, AG plus MG, still showed clear beneath the varnish. She brushed the snow away with her glove and sat. A faint car horn sounded from the street, followed by Pam's unmistakable voice calling, "You hiding back here, Evie?" Evelyn turned to see her best friend trudging through the yard, two steaming mugs in hand. "I figured you'd need caffeine more than closure," Pam said, offering her one. Evelyn accepted it with a small smile. At this point, they're the same thing. Pam sat beside her, breath puffing in the cold air. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sounds were the whisper of wind through the bare branches and the distant hum of a city that no longer demanded anything from her. Finally, Pam broke the silence. "So, this is it?" "This is everything," Evelyn said softly. "Everything she tried to take. Everything he left behind. It's all where it belongs." Pam nodded, eyes following the line of the garden path. "You think she'll stay quiet now?" Evelyn's expression didn't change. "Doesn't matter. I'm done listening." They sat there until the first flakes began to fall. Slow, deliberate, the kind that drift instead of landing. The snow gathered along the edges of the path, softening the hard outlines, turning the yard into something almost peaceful. Evelyn finished her coffee, set the cup beside her, and looked up at the sky. "You ever notice," she said, "that paper outlasts everything? Even the people who don't believe in it?" Pam chuckled. "You've turned bureaucracy into philosophy." "Maybe," Evelyn said, rising to her feet. "But it worked." She turned back toward the house, the light from the candle in the window flickering against the snow. The flame hadn't gone out. Pam followed her inside, shaking the chill from her coat. "You gonna write a book about all this someday?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "No, I already did. One the judge read aloud." She locked the door behind them, the sound of the latch sharp and sure. Then she walked to the mantel, watching the candle burn lower. Aaron's photograph glowed in its light, steady, untouchable. Evelyn whispered, more to him than to herself, "Everything she wanted was written wrong. Everything you gave me was written right." She sat in her chair, exhaled once, and felt the quiet settle around her. Not as emptiness, but as proof. Proof that peace, once signed and sealed, didn't need anyone's permission to exist. Outside, the snow thickened, covering the path, the garden, the years that had led her here. Evelyn's gaze lingered on the candle's flame until it flickered low and steadied again. Then, in a voice low but firm, she said the only truth that mattered. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the paperwork. And that was louder.